This is about the end of the world and whether or not we can justify or determine what will or will not happen, or what will or will not become a predictable end of life on Earth. So, the first thing to understand is that I'm not religious. Religion to me is a discipline and an order that you can aid and assist you in your life if you have problems in particular that seem irreparable or unable to figure out. So this is not about religion. It's not about rules. But it is about the Bible in some degree. Because the Bible has one end of the world. You can predict this parting. The Old Testament has a book called Daniel 12, and it gives the end of the days in numbers. There's a first death and a second death in that book, and then a half a death. So we're going to look at that just to see what a book that, or a religion that is over 5,000 years old, or therein roughly, has to say. It's lasted this long. There has to be a reason for that, and there is, because it has a value that can be defined and recreated in your own life if you need it. It is not, a way to live so much as a mother's milk, at least to me. Regardless of that, we'll read a little bit of this particular book in the Bible. It's short, so don't get excited. It won't be much, or it won't be long. And it does add into what the rest of what is important does say. So this is Daniel 12, and it goes, at that time Michael, a great prince who protects your people. Well, you should understand that when you read the Bible, particularly the Old Testament, you have to read it in the terms that people who lived thousands of years ago would use, and the kind of lives they would live. You can't talk about computers thousands of years ago. They didn't exist, just like lots of other things. You have to go back to their time and view it in the terms that their life would have been viewed in. And you have to remember that if you cannot describe something like a wheel, for instance, with lug nuts and things on it, rubber tires didn't exist. Axles that are held on with bolts and nuts didn't exist. Things like that. So, anyway, there will be a time of distress such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then. So, the distress that we are facing today is an issue of threats. We are threatened by all manner of things that have actually gone wrong. And that is, weapons of mass destruction exist. We are a population crisis, and the fact is that we are growing as a world population by about 1 billion people every 10 years. Roughly, give or take a few, it's close to that. So there won't be any food. The oceans are becoming threatened in every aspect. The water is threatened. The resources are threatened. Everything is basically threatened. Then we'll get to some more of the threats later on. One of the things, of course, that is especially threatened is the mutilation of genetic DNA, which is nature itself. Nature is the building of bodies of life. And genetic materials, genetic instructions, are the things that build those bodies of life. When you mutilate them, as is being done by millions every single day across the world, the end result of that is we can't put it back the way it was. And we sure as heck are not intelligent enough for anything else to be changing nature in God, for man's way instead of God's way. And the evidence of God is absolute in the miracles that we see. Life around us is a miracle. It did not happen by accident. It is a miracle of thought, because it needed thought to create it. Your universities say, we are great, we made this technological breakthrough, whatever it is. Well, it doesn't compare to life. And ask them whether it was an accident or not. It was it just happened. And they'll tell you, no, we put a lot of work and effort and time and money, and we made this happen because we thought it out. Well, the same is true for life. You don't get a body of life without understanding how to build a body of life, and so on and so forth. But anyway, back to this here book. Let's see, at that time your people, everyone whose name is found in the book, will be delivered. Which means you have to make a decision. That's basically what that statement is about. Those people who lived then, or are people who are living now, are confronted with the reality of life that says you got to make a decision for life or against life. So, some will make it for life and some will make it against life. Now, let's see. Multitudes who sleep in the dust will awake. And that just means that the multitudes will think of nothing more than life in time. There's nothing but the earth, and there's nothing but the moments that you spend here, and there's nothing but self and all that. And of course, that is certainly true for today. You're not awake to life; you're awake to time. You're not awake to, the possessions of what life is. You're awake to trophies and things like that. So this predicts that you're going to awaken from that. And maybe you will, and maybe you won't. Not a lot of seeing it yet so far. Anyway, some will awaken to everlasting life, which means that you take into account what the consequences of being wrong and not protecting this earth are. And some will sleep to, everlasting contempt and shame. And those are the people, of course, who say, we don't care, we don't respect life, we're not interested, we just want what we want, and that's all that we want, and don't do anything else. I want what I want, just leave me alone. But of course, if we lose the whole world because of the threats that are true and absolute and can't be ignored, without losing the whole world, then you should in fact go to everlasting contempt and shame, because a world is greater than you are, and that's just the facts. Anyway, there will be those who are wise and shine, which adds into, do you understand the consequences of being wrong when our world is literally at stake? If you do, then you will rise up and you will help people to understand that these things must be dealt with. You can't just avoid them. Can't run away and hide from a world that's dying. You have to confront them. You have to make choices that are in the interest of life. Well, so and those who lead many to righteousness are like stars forever and ever. Well, those are the people who communicate that we can't just sit around. We have to do something. We have to help ourselves protect our world and keep our world alive for ourselves and for our future and for everything on life, everything in life on earth. Those are realistic realities. And if you don't want to accept the fact that we are threatened as a world, then of course you won't do anything. But that doesn't mean you won't die. Nonetheless, let's see. I'll just pass by that. And I, Daniel, looked, and before me stood two others, one on the one bank and one on the other side of the bank of the river. Well, a river is water flowing, or water that is not stagnant. And water flowing is the power of life, basically. Because everything about you it's functionally aided by the water that is within you. All life has water in it. You are 98% water, so they say. I'm not going to argue it. But, water is the power of life, and let's just, stop there. So we have one guy on one side of the power of life, one guy on the other side of the power of life. And of course, what that just means is that one person is demanding this way, and the other person is demanding the other way. And of course, that means that the person demanding life must be protected is on one side of the consequences of what people do, and the other person is saying, we like it just the way it is, leave it alone, don't do anything, because I want what I want and leave me alone. I want what I want and I don't want nothing else. But, when the world dies, because we are 8 billion people now, or thereabouts, what you individually want no longer matters. We're, let's just say 8 billion people. And 8 billion people, no matter what you think, when 8 billion people do anything, they do it 8 billion times a day, or a minute, or whatever it is. That's a lot of people doing a lot of things. And it has consequences. And we have to adjust, because it means our world has changed. Our world has changed. Not what you want, not what I want. Our world has changed. Anyway, one of them said to the man clothed in linen who was above the river, the waters of the river. Well, in the past, back in this time, linen was a sign of royalty or government or those who led, because, linen was hard to get, hard to make, and only the rich could afford it. So it represented royalty. Let's just leave it there. And he's above the waters, which means that is not necessarily connected to the earth, or more correctly, this is somebody, an image of God, or a servant of God. It's an image. Doesn't matter. Anyway, let's see. How long before these astonishing things are fulfilled? And the man says, by acknowledging that there is a God above him, that has said these things, that it will be for a time, times and a half a time. Well, in biblical terms, the first time would be represented by the Old Testament. The Old Testament is a book of law. It was by the law that you could, save yourself, save your world, save your nation, find a way to get to eternity, save, and so on. So the first time is we can save ourselves by the law. And as we go down the page, there are 1,290 days in this, this decree of end of the world to the first death. So anyway, times, well, back to the times and a half a time. Times is equivalent to the New Testament of the Bible, and it is the New Testament represents Jesus and what He provided to the earth, and basically it comes down to, you can be saved by mercy if you do something for yourself and accept that and make changes to your own life. So then the opportunity for mercy goes for 1,335 days, and then there's a half a time, which is the divides the book of mercy by half. And that gives you 667 days and a half. We'll get to that in a bit. So anyway, the writer here says, I don't understand what will be the outcome. It says, close it up and it will be stayed sealed till the end of time. So if we understand it, that means the end of the time has come. That's basically what it says. And of course we can understand it. Let's see. Those who are made spotless and refined, or will be those, and those who are wicked, will just continue to do what they want to do. Anyway, from the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished. And the daily sacrifice is the respect that we owe to God. You know, He made our world. He created our solar system. He built every life here. And you can, of course, the universities say none of that is true, while religions say everything of that is true. And the reality of that is, take a look around and understand that life is life, but it isn't here just for an accident. There's nothing about evolution that has been proven. That is an absolute lie. What is proven is the fact that life is a very complex reality, and it requires certain things to survive, certain things to live, certain things to, you know, be born, certain things to survive, and all of that. And it all has to be together at the same time. In other words, you cannot have a whole body without a heart. It doesn't work. You have to have all the parts, and you have to have all the pieces, and you have to have them all at once. And that includes the, let's call it software, the mental awareness of what it is that makes you, you know, breathe air or accept food or any of that. You know, it all has to be put together at once, because you can't live unless you got it all, which is the end of evolution in itself. Evolution says chaos built everything. Well, chaos builds nothing. Chaos tears apart anything complex into its most simple form. That is certainly not life. Life is the absolute opposite of that. Anyway, so and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, and from there will be 1290 days to the first death. So in this book, the abomination that causes desolation is in fact the attempts that men are making, the universities are making, to create sunfire on Earth. Sunfire is, you know, take a look at the sun up in the sky. Burns your skin in summertime from 91 million miles away. That fire they're trying to bring here. And they built machines to ignite that fire here on Earth. And the fact is that they say that we don't have to worry about igniting that fire on Earth, because there's not enough gravity here, so the fire will just extinguish itself. That's the plan. There is no other plan. There is no other theory. There is no other option. The fire is just supposed to extinguish itself. If you believe that, you're stupid. Well, you're beyond stupid. Well, if you believe that the fire will extinguish itself, you're stupid. So anyway, if you look at the sun, you know, your scientists in your university say, well, that's caused by a fantasy element that hasn't been proven to exist, and it's caused by hydrogen combining to form helium, and helium is one of the rarest elements found in the universe. And obviously, if the sun was making helium with every BTU it created, there would be a lot of helium. That alone proves their theory is incorrect. But we'll get on with that. So, well, the fire on the sun is in fact a nuclear fire, which means it burns the bond in atoms. Rather than a nuclear explosion, it is a nuclear fire. And when you burn atoms, atoms become fuel, which makes everything on Earth fuel for the fire. The idea that the fire will just extinguish itself, it's not only ludicrous, it endangers this planet, it endangers the life on this planet, it endangers every future life on this planet. It even endangers the solar system itself. Because the solar system, you know, once we put another sun in here instead of the Earth, will change. So there isn't any greater abomination that could be conceived of by men than to try to ignite sunfire here on Earth. It comes down to, there's no middle ground for this. It comes down to either the sun extinguishes itself, or, well, the sunfire that we ignite extinguishes itself because they say not enough gravity here. But wrong means that once ignited, a 10 million degree fire that burns atoms for fuel, as it plainly look at the sun, plainly that's where the energy comes from. You know, there's nothing else that could produce that energy that we know of. There's nothing else that could produce the kind of longevity that the sun represents. There's nothing else that we know of, period. Anything else is a fantasy. There's nothing else but the fact that it burns atoms. We know that can be true, and it obviously is. So anyway, we have the abomination, and it rises, upon the first experiment in the first machine that has the possibility to ignite sunfire on Earth. That machine was the National Ignition Facility at Lawrence Livermore Laboratories in San Francisco, and it occurred on April 1st, or April Fool's Day, 2012. So, that is our beginning on this end of the earth, or end of the world prediction in the Bible. And so, it begins, and that's the count of 1,290 days. Begins on April 1st, 2012. 1,290 days later has passed. So the idea that we can stop this whole thing by using the law is now over. They have progressed too far. They have progressed to the point where they can in fact ignite that fire at any time. And that is the end of our world, because we can't put it out. You can't approach a 10 million degree fire. 10 million degree fire will suck up everything and eject it into the outer space within, probably 100 miles. It is that much fire, that much updraft, that much reality that we can't approach. And there's nothing we can do about it. So anyway, the time for law has ended. And the court said, absolutely not. We believe in the university, they are God. That's really what they said. So now we are in the period of mercy. Mercy can stop this. God can stop this. Mercy means that God has to do it, not us. But He won't do it, as is the whole concept of the New Testament. He's not going to do it unless you yourself change. Humanity has to change, or there will be no mercy. Do you not believe that? If you're a Christian, that's the whole concept of being Christian, is that you have to accept the idea that you have to do something too. Really, you have to do something too, or there will be no mercy for you. You have to make a decision on your own and progress accordingly. Anyway, so that's 1,335 days, and by my calculation, and I should have done a better job of actually calculating it before, but nonetheless, you can calculate it for itself. Starts at April 1st, 2012, goes for 1,290 days, and it goes for 1,335 days, and my calculation says that's July 8th, 2019 would be the end of mercy, which means that July 9th, 2019 would be the beginning of hell, according to biblical prophecy. So, and that is the half time. So we divide the time of mercy by 1,335 days by half. That's 667 and a half days, which means there are 666 days of hell, 1 day for judgment, and then a half a day for whatever happens to those who are judged. Whatever happens. Certainly nothing that I'm going to predict. So anyway, that is the Daniel 12 prediction, or end of days. Prediction has begun, and certainly has possibilities to prove that it is correct, because they are certainly trying to ignite sunfire on Earth. They have built several machines, and they're bigger and bigger all the time. One in Germany is very dangerous, and one in France, I believe it is bigger, going to use more fuel. Very big threat, and there are other threats. And that doesn't include all the other threats. There is a tremendous reality of what has happened on this earth because of the university and what it has chosen to do, and what humanity, in terms of following them, have allowed them to do. You know, when we start changing things, there are consequences to that. And if you do not accept the disciplines and the respect that is necessary to choose life first, life first is the most important part of anything humanity can do. And of course, the university is in fact a reality of life comes, you know, last, if at all. They are never concerned with what happens to life for the living, and that is a tremendous problem and the biggest cause for why we are so threatened as a world. It's not a threat against somebody in particular, it's a threat against everyone, and more so than you think. And I recommend that you look at some of my sites, Just Talking 5.info, or perhaps Just Talking 6.info, or any of the other sites that I provide will help you understand some of the threats and what it is that we are or are not doing to ourselves. That would be all. I wish you well, but you won't survive. Even whether there's a biblical prediction or not, it doesn't matter, because the threats that are true are here, and if we don't stop them, there is no future. I mean, you know, we can't raise the population by 1 billion people a year, or 1 billion people every 10 years. We can't. There is no food. We eat life. Life needs room, life needs place, life needs this and that and the other thing, water too. And if you take all the space, there is no room for life. So that we can eat. You know, we eat other life. If you can't give space to the other life that we eat, then you don't have any food. I mean, the list is very long, and the choice and the time frame in which to make that choice to protect this world, to choose for life itself, to be aware of the consequences and what happens if we are wrong, to make a decision to be sure that life is first and we will not be wrong for life or for the planet, is terribly important. It is life or death for this world. And your child and everything you love and everything you want and everything you need and everything else. We have a changed world. We are no longer nature take care of us. We are consuming nature, and it can no longer defend itself from us. That is a big, big change. Not to mention just trying to ignite the planet on fire, or having children that there's no possibility that we can support or feed them. And there are endless consequences to all of those things. Mutilating life, what are you thinking? You're not. These people that are, you know, throwing the world itself away, risking and gambling with the entire planet, would in fact have to be called Satan. Satan is the biblical term for a destroyer of a world. It's not more complicated than that. It's just destroyer of a world. That's all it is. You know, apparently he's here. And that's not a biblical, or that's not a Bible preacher or religious context of anything. That's just reality. And, you know, our world is in trouble.